how do presidential elections work? How do they work? Now, this might seem like a kind of obvious question and a kind of easy one to answer. Well, people vote, and then there's a president, which is true, yes, but it's definitely a little more complicated than that, and it's kind of important to understand a little bit more of the detail involved in electing a president, in choosing a president. Especially right now in the United States. I'm an American. There's one going on. We call it the 2020 presidential race. Often when we talk about elections, we say the race, the presidential race. Okay, so how does this work? What happens? All right, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this works and what happens, how presidents are elected. Everybody knows right now the president of the United States is Donald Trump, right? Everybody knows that. Now, the important thing to sort of center our discussion or our topic is the idea of parties. And there are really two main parties. There are actually many more parties, but there are two main parties in the United States. We have what we call the left, often liberals, and these are typically the Democrats or the Democratic Party. Then we have on the right the Republicans or the Republican Party. So we have these two parties. Now, usually the presidential race, or in fact, any political race, maybe for a mayor, maybe a governor, whatever, will include the party of the person who's running for that office. In this case, we're talking about the president. You're a Democrat or you're a Republican. And again, you can be in another party, but these are the two main ones. Left, right, blue, red, in fact. And if you're curious about the animals that represent these, the red is an elephant. Republicans are represented by an elephant, and the left represented by a donkey. Okay, now, this is how it goes. Let's say we are in the year 2016. Now, in the year 2016, Barack Obama has finished being president. He has finished his term. You can not be president for more than 8 years. We'll talk more about that in just a second. You can't be president for more than 8 years. So he was president for more than 8 years. Now we need to have a battle between the left and the right, between the Republicans and the Democrats, to decide who's going to be the next president. Could be one or the other. All right. Now each side will run candidates in their party. It can be an unlimited number. Could be 100, could be 2. Well, it's usually not that many. This time there are many, but in 2016 there were really two main candidates on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and there were, I think it started with 12 main candidates on the Republican side, the red side. One of those people was Donald Trump. Now, each of these sides are in what's called a primary within their party. The process is to find out who is going to be the candidate for their party, within their party. One for the Democrats, one for the Republicans, and then we have what's called a general election. So Hillary Clinton was, in 2016, the candidate for the Democratic Party. And we'll talk about the process of the primaries in a second. Donald Trump was the candidate, became the candidate for the Republican Party. Then they had a general election, and Donald Trump won. He became the president. All right, here we are in 2020. Welcome to the year 2020. Donald Trump has now been president for 4 years. But I thought you said that he could be president for 8 years. Obama was. No, not necessarily. After 4 years, you have to run again. But you run within your party, and usually there are no other candidates running against you if you are the one who's been there for 4 years. So every 4 years, we have to have an election, even if there is a president who hasn't been there for 8 years. Donald Trump has been there for 4 years. Now he needs to try to beat someone on the other side. He has to try to beat a Democrat. Because he is the president for the Republican side, because he's a Republican, no one else is seriously trying to beat him running against him on the Republican side. Actually, there are two guys who are trying, but yeah, we don't really need to talk about that. He has a chance to be the president for 4 more years. These are called terms. Each 4-year section is called a term. 4 years, 4 years. Now, some presidents don't win another term. They lose to the other side. So they only get 1 term. That's 4 years. If they win again, like Obama did, like George W. Bush did, like Bill Clinton did, then they get a second term. Totally, that's 8 years. Okay, so 2 terms is the maximum that a person can serve. Now, back in the 1940s, there was a president named FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He served 3, maybe 4 terms? I can't remember. Maybe 4. Might have been 4. And then they made a rule to say, okay, you can't serve more than 2 terms. we gotta limit the number of terms. So basically, it's like this. You've got Donald Trump, who's just finished 4 years. He now has the chance to do 4 more. If he wins for the Republican side, he will have 2 terms finished. In 2024, we will be in the same situation as 2016, where the Republicans will have candidates and the Democrats will have candidates, and they will each have to choose one person to be their representative, to be their candidate, to run in the general election. That's how it works, okay? So, now that brings us to what's going on right now, okay? The Democrats, the left, they've got to choose somebody. So you probably see all the time on the news these debates happening and these news stories about the different candidates and these elections that are happening. We had the first one last Tuesday. There's another one this Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. Was it last Tuesday or Monday? I think it was Tuesday. What is all this about? This is the process of choosing the candidate on the Democratic side. Very early on, a year ago, candidates started announcing that they would like to run for president. They do it very early. Why? Because they need to raise money, lots and lots of money. Why do they need to raise money? Because they have to hire staff to go around and get people to support them. They have to pay for advertisements on TV and on the internet, right? Facebook advertisements, YouTube advertisements. This costs millions and millions of dollars. Now, some candidates try to get money directly from people, mostly. And so they get people to donate money to them, people who support them. They ask for donations. They'll send out emails. I get emails every day from the candidates I like asking me to donate money. This is how they get money. Some go to rich groups they're called PACs, P-A-C-S, and they collect a bunch of money together to donate to this person, usually a group of people, and they have a lot of money. It's a smaller number of people, though, or a smaller number of, for example, companies. Anyway, they're trying to get as much money as they can so that when it's time to actually choose the person, they have enough support from people to be the nominee for their party. Now, we've just entered a very important period. We've just started what's called the primary season. What are primaries? Well, basically, primaries are the process of figuring out the candidate for this party or this party. So there are the primaries, then the general election. There started out with, I think there was something like 20 candidates at the beginning when they started doing the debates. Now I believe it's down to 8 candidates, okay? And over the next couple of weeks, you will see candidates dropping out of the race because they realize I have no chance to win. Because now is when things really start happening, because we have real people voting. The candidates go to every single state in the United States and do what's called an election, a primary election. Sometimes it's called a caucus. Okay, every state. It always starts in Iowa. It's a state sort of in the north of the United States, near Michigan. Okay, it's going to be in the north. Not many people live there, but it's a very important one. It's the first one. It's called the Iowa caucus. And it's all over the news what's been happening with that. Tuesday is the one in the state called New Hampshire. And then, I don't know if it's the next Tuesday or the next one, there's something called Super Tuesday, when they do a bunch of state elections at the same time, on the same day. Many states do their primaries at the same time. People go and vote for the candidate they like best. And this really helps to decide who's maybe going to be the candidate and who is definitely not. So over the next few weeks, you'll see it go from 7 to 6 to 5 to 4 to maybe 3 or 2 candidates left. By the time we reach maybe June, we'll probably have 2 candidates left running in the Democratic primary. Right now it's more, but over time we will probably have 2, maybe 3. Okay, now you also see debates happening. So they debate on TV, people talk about that on the news, and then there are votes. I live in New York. New York's primary is a little bit later on. I think it's in June. So I won't have a chance to vote for my favorite candidate until June. And I'm pretty sure that my favorite candidate will still be in the race at that point, because I think my favorite candidate has a good chance of winning. So that's how it works. Now, how many votes do you need to get to be the candidate on the Democratic side? How many candidates do you need? Well, it's like this, actually. So you have primaries and caucuses. The difference between a primary and a caucus is that basically a caucus is a different structure. It's very confusing, and it's sort of a process of people raising their hands and moving around. It's really complicated. But basically, they're choosing the person they want to support to run in the general election. You need to get what are called delegates, and delegates are given to you when you do well in a state. So at the end of last Tuesday, the winner got 13 delegates. These are basically people who are assigned to you, who are kind of like money, points, who, if you get to a certain amount, make up your qualification to be the nominee. It's a little confusing, a little complicated. But anyway, you need to get 1,990 delegates. And the population of the state will decide how many delegates are in that state. So Iowa has not that many delegates, maybe 40, 50, something like that, maybe in the 40s or 50s. But for example, California has many delegates because it's such a huge state. The population is so big. So there are many, many more delegates that you can win in California. Once you reach 1,990, you've reached a majority. You are the nominee. You are the nominee in the Democratic Party. And you will be the person who will then run in the general election against Donald Trump this time. So it's going to be one Democrat who wins the primaries against Donald Trump, and that's basically how it works. Then we move on to the general election. That happens in November, but then leading up to November, people are voting, and there's a lot of debates. All of that stuff is happening, just like the primaries, except now it's not Democrats against each other. It's one Democrat versus one Republican. And there are other people running for president, too, in smaller parties, but they don't get much attention, honestly. It's really these two. So then in the general election, you have to get 270. If you get 270, then you win the general election and you become the president. Okay? You win the general election. That's what Donald Trump did back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. He got this number. He went over this number. He won. That's it. So now he's the president. And that is basically how it works. And that's what's going on right now. And in Iowa, the reason that everyone was talking about that is because there were some errors in calculating the votes. There was an app that broke, that crashed, that didn't work properly when they were trying to send in the votes. So it's still, even a week later, not clear who won Iowa. there are two people at the top, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, and they're at the top. And it's not clear who won. It's not clear who the winner is because they're still trying to figure out how to fix all of the errors and recalculate everything so that it's correct. Anyway, it's kind of a mess. It's kind of a mess. The next state, hopefully, will be more clear. We'll have a clear winner. I think it's a very interesting process. And anyway, that is how the elections work. By the way, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see my future videos. And don't forget to check out the courses in the links in the description.